What's up, you guys? Steven here for Off the Shelf Movie Nights to talk to you about physical media, about Blu-rays, 4Ks, and DVDs, the way we like to buy and own those movies, put them in a beautiful library, and watch them when and how we want without having to worry about them being pulled from a streaming service or paying for them over and over again to said streaming service. So if you like physical media, you collect physical media, or you just like movies, you're in the right spot. Let's have a conversation. So do the things, hit the buttons, join the conversation. Let's be part of this thing. And my chair is rattling here. Today I'm going to talk to you about a portion of my Pushing 150 project. Pushing 150 project is the project where I'm trying to see 150 movies in the theater in 1 year. And the movie I'm talking about right now is Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. It's one of the films I saw over the weekend. I saw two, but we're going to talk about this one right now. And we're going to talk about it spoiler-free. Also, I'm going to talk about the genre in general and kind of just go over that a little bit at the end of this video. So let's dig into it really quickly. So Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. I don't know if any of you guys find this entertaining that the directors and writers, John Francis Daley and Jonathan Goldstein, previously made a little film called Game Night, which was a movie about friends getting together and playing games. And now they're making a movie about a game that friends get together and play. Now, this is not meta. That's not a spoiler. This is not some, fantasy thing that all of a sudden at the end of it, people are actually playing a game and it's like that. It's nothing like that. This is an actual fantasy film based around the world of Dungeons & Dragons. I just think that that's entertaining. I think the only thing these two can do now is to actually make their own game. I think that's what they have to do next. It's actually make a game. Anyway, back on topic. The movie itself. I had kind of low expectations for the movie for a long time because this has been attempted before. There was a animated series in the mid-'80s. There have been multiple movies. There was one notable movie, I think in 2002, which is really a failure. It's just a travesty of a film. And then there's been a number of attempts at TV movies. For some reason, it's a franchise that has been mistreated cinematically. Well, those wrongs have been righted with this movie, I am proud and thrilled to say, because Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves is a joy to watch. It's a comedy hits, it's funny, it's lighthearted, it clips along at a pretty fast pace. Everyone you can tell is having a good time making this movie. I particularly love Michelle Rodriguez in this movie because if you look at her when she's not actually delivering dialogue and she's just kind of in the scenes, she's almost got a smirk on her face the whole time. I think she's just having a really good time. That would lead to one of the negatives that I have about this movie is there's a big cast, but the movie is really only carried by 3 actors. They do an amazing job. I love them. But the other actors are just sort of there. Anybody could have played those roles. And I'm not necessarily insulting the actors. Maybe it was just they weren't written enough. They weren't quite written with enough oomph to them. But the 3 actors are, of course, Chris Pine, Michelle Rodriguez, and Hugh Grant, who's having a year. I mean, he is great in this. So this movie, if you're a D&D player, really is like a D&D game. You have a group of people, each one of them is a different kind of character, they each have their own special abilities. Chris Pine's ability to me is the funniest because he really is a planner, and they even say it in the trailer, so it's not spoilery. He makes a plan, if that plan fails, he has a backup plan. If that plan fails, he has another backup plan. That is what he does. That's his job. Michelle Rodriguez kicks ass. We have a shapeshifter that shifts into animals, and then a magician. I love or a wizard. I love the wizard because if you go back on YouTube and look at some of the old animated series, which I kind of did getting ready for this, they remind me, the wizard in that series and this one remind me of each other, not in look, but in the way they actually execute their magic. It's not great. They struggle. Let's just put it that way. They're not the best wizard in the world. So it was very also fresh and wonderful to watch a movie that wasn't leaning on internet cliches or memes or modern stuff for its humor. This was just straight up funny. It was character-driven humor. It's humor that'll last. It's humor that'll still be funny 20 years from now. I argue that, maybe it's a hot take, but I argue that Shrek is not a good movie because it's not funny now, because its humor is now so dated. There is universal humor that lasts forever, and this leans more that direction than in the pop culture referential type of thing. So I was very happy to see that. And the special effects are fun. They're not bad. I would argue I like the special effects in this movie better than the special effects in most Marvel movies these days. Marvel movies, they hide their limited time, their limited budget on bloomy looks. That's sort of what I would call 80s glamour shot look, where this one is just crisp and clean, and it owns its cheapness when it's cheap, and it looks good when it's better, and it's just good. I prefer this kind of special effects. It was nice to see some built things here and there. That was really cool. Yeah, it had a very retro vibe. I loved the movie. I highly recommend it. So this movie has all the good and the bad of a Dungeons & Dragons adventure. Now, don't get me wrong, you don't have to have played D&D at all to love this movie, or to not love this movie. This movie is a pulp fantasy movie that just happens to be based on an existing franchise of games. And if you are a D&D player, there will be a lot of things in there that you are really going to love to see. You will love them a little more than other people, but if you don't know the game, you won't love them any less. It's just part of the world building that's happening in the movie. Now, the things it has from D&D that are kind of normally annoying, but not in this case, but are normally annoying, is it has side quests, it has extensive exposition, because if you play D&D, you've got a game master who literally tells you the story. Well, the movie remedies that by having a character tell you the story, and normally that kind of exposition really bothers me. I think it's weak writing, but I think this is leaning into the franchise, and they take that exposition and usually not only tell you the story, but make it funny, which is great. I don't want to get too much into the plot. Let's just say that Chris Pine has to put together a group to go and pull a heist to save the day because he exists in the gray area. He is heroic if necessary, but also, he's still a thief. And that leads to a lot of really fun action, including some pretty good fighting scenes, wink wink Marvel, and a good time. It's funny, it's action-packed, it's fast-paced. Go watch the movie. It's just so fresh and fun, and everybody is so likable, even the villains. I hesitantly say that I would love to see more movies with these characters on adventures, but I also would be fine if they don't touch it because they've made something great. They've finally done the Dungeons & Dragons franchise fairly. Now, what could be cool is if this movie spurs a reinvigoration of pulp fantasy films. Pulp fantasy films in the 80s, and probably before, but as far back as I've collected movies, the 80s is what I know the most, 80s forward. But in the 80s, I would argue pulp fantasy films were the superhero movies of that era. I think before that it was westerns, but if you take a look, and I did make a short list of the ones that I know about. Oh, it's not a short list, that's the point. But a list of the ones I know about, and I'm sure I've left some out. What I call a pulp fantasy film is a mid to low budget fantasy movie with magic and swords and, all of the trappings of fantasy. The stories are usually pretty straightforward, and most of them are done tongue-in-cheek. They know they're doing something campy, and they're having a good time doing it. That was before Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones elevated the fantasy genre. And I love that they did that. I love those movies and that show, but I also really just enjoy a good cheesy fantasy film. Here's some that I could think of. And I have a few of these on physical media, and I'm going to show them to you. So, and I actually have them in chronological order. So Clash of the Titans from 1981. From 1982, I actually have this one. It's a Flash Gordon. Now, this one is a little bit of a, different play on that fantasy because this is a sci-fi movie also. But I would argue it's pulp sci-fi with a lot of fantasy elements. Dragon Slayer from 1981. Flash Gordon from 1980. Dragon Slayer from 1981. I need to pick up that 4K, by the way. Excalibur from 1981. Now, of course, that's more of a King Arthur type of story. It's still fantasy to me. The Dark Crystal from 1982. I have that on Steelbook. I just don't want to dig it out. Sword and the Sorcerer from 82. Beastmaster from 1982. This is a beautiful Vinegar Syndrome release of Beastmaster. Conan the Barbarian from 82. I want to skip ahead because there's also Conan the Destroyer from 84. We have a Hercules movie that had Lou Ferrigno in 83. Sheena from 1984. Legend from 1985. Red Sonja from 1985 also. Lady Hawk was in 1985. Then also Krull from 1985. Krull is definitely a fantasy film, but it has a lot of science fiction trappings also. Highlander, I should have pulled that off the shelf. I have that Steelbook from 1986, Labyrinth from 1986, Masters of the Universe from 1987, and Willow from 1988. And that doesn't even include, I didn't even include The Princess Bride because I don't dig that movie that much. And then all the animated ones, you know, the Hobbit movies and The Last Unicorn, Fire and Ice. So they were all mid-budget, tongue-in-cheek, kind of cheesy fantasy films that were just a lot of fun. And then that genre, it went to TV because we had Xena and we had Hercules. I think there were probably others. And then it kind of disappeared. Fantasy got more serious with Lord of the Rings and with Game of Thrones, and we still have the Game of Thrones franchise going. There's been a Wheel of Time that was attempted. I don't think it was very good. And then Lord of the Rings is going in a TV series, Rings of Power also. So it's just fun with this Dungeons & Dragons movie to see a return to pulp fantasy. I mean, they don't talk in a specific way. They use modern slang, but not internet or meme slang. They just talk like modern people, and they don't care, and no one cares, and it's just fun. I highly recommend this movie. I highly recommend every movie that I listed just now because I love this genre of film, and I hope, if nothing else, Dungeons & Dragons brings back the pulp fantasy film. That's all I got, you guys. Till next we meet, pull something cool off the shelf, share it with friends and family, and remind them why physical media is the best way to watch films and TV at home. I'll see you guys on the next one.